Okay, I'm going to change my little box in the corner so I can see my slides. There we go. Options, please. Okay, there we go. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is. Happy August. I'm Delilah Bergen, and why do I talk about conflict resolution? I do a couple of things. I'm an elder mediator, so I work with conflict in families around aging issues a lot. I'm also on the faculty of the conflict resolution at Abilene Christian University, so I teach there. I'm also a bioethicist, and conflict is just a part of making serious medical decisions and just thinking about care in general. Conflict is just a basic. And so it's not scary. It's something we run into all the time. It's just something we need to have some knowledge about and think about some ways to handle it. This is a two-part series that Beth asked me to put together. Today is talking about conflict among your own staff, with your coworkers, and next month we'll talk about conflict with patients and families, which is a little bit different. Beth is going to send out the slides, I think, later, so you'll have all my contact information. So if you have any questions or you need anything, give me a call. Okay, so conflict. Most of us don't enjoy it. I'm not crazy about it either, and I'm a mediator. We'll go out of our way to avoid it if we can. Some people do see it as an opportunity, or they just enjoy the battle and they charge right into the fray. We all have a personality type. There's nothing wrong with either one, but think about it. Are you an avoider of conflict, or are you an engager? Most of us fall into one camp or the other, and that colors how we interact with people. So what are the causes of conflict in the workplace? Almost all conflict is about unmet needs. There's somebody that needs something, is hurting in some way, feels like life has been unfair to them, or on this particular day it has been. There's something going on. They brought something with them to work. So it's unmet needs. So it could be physical needs. They're really tired. They're hungry. They need a brief break. Maybe the room's too hot or too cold. If you're trying to work in a hot situation, that's miserable. And maybe they have an injury that's hurting them, or they're just not feeling well that day. Or it's all the things that I call day residue, the things that we bring to work with us. I had a fight with my spouse this morning, that didn't go well, or my kids were problematic this morning, or I have an ill child who's home and I'm worried about that. Financial stresses that the family's going through, whatever it is, we don't set those things aside when we get in our car and go to work in the morning. They come with us. Many workplace disputes, though, are about respect. Respect me as an individual, respect me as a worker, as a professional, treat me with dignity, treat me equally. So respect, dignity, and justice are big issues. And we have cultural and language differences that also contribute to conflict in the workplace. We don't see things in the same way or understand each other in the same way. And I think we see more conflict in healthcare than in many other professions. It's a really challenging career. You all know that. You work long, hard hours. The work is difficult. Sometimes it's physically exhausting, and you have to be emotionally resilient because you're hearing the problems of the patients, the people that you work with, and you carry those with you as well. It's also complex and interdependent. Many professions are not as intense in those ways, but healthcare is doctors, nurses, hands-on caregivers, administrators in agencies, pharmacists, therapists. Everybody has to work together. Communications have to be good, and they rarely are. Then we have laws and insurance companies that try to dictate what you can do for a patient. That just further complicates things. So we have a very interdependent and complicated system. But what I find is that healthcare workers have one common characteristic. They really care about their patients. Even if they're on the administrative side, they care about what the company or the agency or the hospital does. And that makes caregiving more emotional than other jobs, I think, in so many ways. such as working in retail. That's hard work too, and you deal with a lot of cranky people, but it's maybe not quite as emotional as those of us who work in life and death situations. When you have more emotion, you will have more conflict. It's just a given. Oh, and I should actually, can you see the slides? Okay, if you're all right, then I'm not going to put it in full screen mode because then I'll lose you. Okay with it this way? Can you see? Just give a thumbs up or something if it's okay, or Beth, let me know.
It's good.
Okay, then we're just going to go ahead. But this going on out there, we're calm and cool and collected and logical, right? We're in control all the time. And logic rules all of my decisions and yours, right? And controls our behavior. Not so much on most days. We'd like to think that's the truth. There is a theory that's been around for a lot of years now, developed by Daniel Kahneman, who actually won the Nobel Prize in economics for this. He calls it system 1 and system 2 thinking. I usually refer to it as type 1, type 2. His initial book on this topic was called Thinking Fast and Slow. And his theory is that we make decisions and we guide our behavior based on 2 different cognitive systems. Type 1 is that ancient reptilian sort of flight, freeze, or fight response. That initial, I know something's bad or dangerous, this is what I have to do, and you react. Type 2 is where we like to think we are all the time, the careful, reasoned analysis of situations. We compare the pros and cons, we weigh our options, and then we give that rational decision. And that's what we think we do. And more often, we actually are the type 1 type of thinkers. What we use for most of our day are heuristics. Or a heuristic is a shortcut that our brain has developed. It's a mental shortcut that helps us make those decisions quickly. I have a glass of water here, okay? If that starts to fall off the table, I'm gonna make a grab for it and try to catch it before I have a real mess on my hands. That's not a careful, slow, reasoned decision. I don't calculate, oh, well, it's this far and it's tipping over the edge and it's gonna take this much force to pick it up. I don't calculate how wide a pool of water I'll have on the office floor if I miss it, and how valuable is it to catch this before it goes over, how much energy will that exert versus picking it up later, cleaning up the mess. I just grab for the glass. That's a heuristic. I know that a falling object can be stopped, or the fall can be stopped if I grab it. And my type 1 thinking kicks in. Automatically, I reach out and grab the glass. That's not a reasoned decision, it's an automatic decision. I'm relying on a heuristic and it's type 1 thinking. Same thing, like the example I've got on the slide. If a tiger runs out of the jungle toward me and it's roaring loudly and charging at me, I'm gonna turn around and run. I may not run very fast anymore, but I'm gonna run because that tiger's dangerous. Same thing for a charging bear, a charging dog, a charging squirrel in my backyard. Whatever it is, if something's running straight at me, my brain has the same reaction as it would with that tiger. It says, danger's coming at you, get out of there. I don't stop and calculate, well, how dangerous is this animal? Do I have the strength or the tools around me to overcome it? Can I stop the charge? I don't think that through. My type 1 thinking kicks in, my heuristic that says, dangerous animal coming at you, run, and I run. So that's type 1 thinking. And that seems to be our most frequent decision-making style. There are neuropsychologists, neuroscientists, behavioral economists that really look at decision-making issues. And they say that our brain will recognize a pattern or a situation that it's seen before. So when it quickly recalls that situation, it also recalls our prior responses to that situation that have been successful. They've worked well for us, and so we make the same decision this time. There's no lengthy thought process, no burning of calories in contemplation, because our brains don't like to waste calories. There's no delayed response that increases our danger. We use our quick learned responses. And we do that as we respond to people in the workplace all the time. We hear a question we've heard before, we give the same answer we gave before. We see a situation or meet someone and we've had a good relationship with them before, a good reaction, we have that good reaction again. If we've had a problematic relationship and we've had a bad reaction, we have a bad reaction again. Those are quickly made decisions. Now, type 2 or system 2 thinking is the thinking where we do sit down and really analyze. We may encounter a new or novel situation, one we haven't seen before. My brain quickly runs through its case scenarios and says, I don't know what to do with this one. We don't have an answer for this. We don't have a heuristic. So I'm going to have to take a slower, critical look at the situation. I'm going to look at the people or issues. I'm going to look at what's involved, the choices before me, the consequences of those choices. I'm going to filter all that information through my own beliefs, convictions, values. I'm going to debate the pros and cons in my head. I may try to do it quickly, but I'm sorting through all this information, and then I'm going to try to make a careful and reasoned decision. But that takes time and it burns energies. And our brains are basically lazy organs. Our brain likes to expend just as little energy as possible to get its job done. So we don't like to think that hard if we don't have to. If there's a type 1 or system 1 heuristic available, we're going to use it. Quick and easy makes our brain happy. So we don't always make the wonderful rational decisions we think we're making. We may just be responding because we've seen something similar before. So what pushes us to do that slower and more careful analysis? Being challenged by someone else, having them ask us why we made that decision, or are we sure that's right, or have we looked at it in another way? That can make us stop and think. When we do force ourselves to look thoughtfully at conflicting data or ideas, my initial reaction is to say yes to something, but if I stop and take the time to look at pros and cons, or maybe to read an article somebody's handed me about that option, or to discuss it with coworkers, maybe I'm going to make a different decision. A really good cognitive exercise is to force myself to argue the opposite side. My instinct tells me to say yes, but what would happen if I say no? Is there a good case for no? That's going to force me into type 2 thinking. And if we recognize that something is a really serious issue, it could change our lives, it could change our business, we tend to take more time and think our way through. So those are all reasons to do type 2 thinking. So which type of thought do we use most? Everyday interactions, usually type 1 or system 1. And that works pretty well right until it doesn't. When we miss something, when we make a decision too quickly and our behavior or our decisions reflect that, and we haven't taken time to consider and think things through, we may miss something. And now the person that we're dealing with has an unmet need. And that causes them pain. And now we're going to have a conflict. Okay. Not only do we sometimes make decisions too quickly or based on past experience and not take in the new information, but once we do that, there's something called confirmation bias. Once I make my decision, and it may be a quick one and it may not be a great one, but once I make it, my lazy brain, which normally doesn't like to do any work, will go out of its way to justify my decision, to back it up, to find confirming data, to solicit support from people around me. I will work very, very hard to confirm that I made the right decision. It might be much simpler to simply change my mind, to look at the data and change my mind. I'm less likely to do that than I am to try to find confirmations that I was right. We don't like being wrong. I think if you look at our politics of the last year, you're going to see a lot of that, a year and a half, with vaccines, with elections, with everything else. When people take a position, they will work hard to confirm it. They'll gather the information that does fit and reject the rest of it and continue to say they're right rather than do that type 2 analysis. So confirmation bias is very, very real. And there's a little bit more bad news as we make decisions and interact with people. The more emotion there is, the less type 2 reasoning we do. When we get emotional about something, We tend to revert to type 1 thinking almost immediately. We have real trouble working our way out of that system to do careful, reasoned analysis when we're emotional. It's almost impossible to drag ourselves from one to the other. So when people are angry, they're very sad, they're making decisions in the type 1 fashion. They're not making good, reasoned type 2 decisions. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about type 1 and type 2, or some scientists call it system 1, system 2. So as we make decisions, we know that we're more likely to use those heuristics, rely on those, make quick, easy decisions based on patterns we've seen before. Along with that, as we enter a new situation, we each bring what's called our frame. We each perceive a situation in our own unique way. We're all individuals. We have different family backgrounds. We have religious and cultural backgrounds, different education, different career path. We've had different interactions with the people we're dealing with today. We have a different history with our workplace and with the policies there. We maybe have political beliefs that are coloring what we're doing. There are just 101 things that we bring into that situation. We have to consider our own role. Are you there as a supervisor? Are you there as a coworker? Are you there as an employee? And you're dealing with your supervisor, what's your role? All of that, plus your day residue, those things we talked about, the fight you had with your spouse this morning, or a child or a sick parent, whatever it is, all of that comes into the situation with us. We don't come in as a fresh tape or a fresh blank or fresh slate. We come in carrying all of those things with us, and that's our frame. That's going to color the way we're viewing the question or the situation before us. And we are apples and oranges. We're all different parties. We're bringing our own frame to the situation. So if we put 2 employees in a room, we have 2 different frames looking at the issue that they're in discord about. Sometimes it seems like we're speaking different languages. It's so different, even when we're not. And sometimes we are, and that's even more complicated. But we see things in different ways. So here's another wrinkle. Not only do we have different frames that we bring into the situation, but people also say things and it may not be what they really mean. It's not that they're lying. It's just that we take positions. We talk about positions versus interests when we're looking at conflict resolution. My position is what I say. So picture 2 carers in a care facility. Lunch is just over. They need to clean presumably and get back to their regular work. And person A says, I want you to work faster cleaning up the dining room. You are lazy. And the second person whips around and goes, where do you get off calling me lazy? I work hard. In fact, I work harder than you do. What's wrong with you? You're lazy. I'm not lazy. And then they start screaming at each other, to the great entertainment of your residents or concern for them, to the annoyance of other staff, to your frustration. What's going on here? They both brought their individual frames and their day residue into this, right? Positions were what they said. You need to work harder. You're lazy. Why are you being rude to me? You're lazier than I am. Okay. Those are positions, but what are the interests? What's behind that? Interests are what people really need to get out of that conflict situation. What would help them resolve the conflict? What are they looking for? And they may not even be able to articulate that right away. In this case, person A may have just had a really awful night. It's day residue. She's doing and appreciated for how hard she's working. But her baby's teething and she was up half the night. She's exhausted. And what she's really asking her coworker, the other employee, is, do you see me today? Do you see how worn I am? Do you hear me? Can you hear how tired I am? I really need us to divide tasks fairly today. I can't pick up any slack for you. And in fact, I may need you to pick up a little slack for me. I'm hurting today. Can you give me a little bit of help? That's what I need today. Those are her interests. But her position was, you're lazy. You're not doing your job. Hopefully, coworker B, hearing that, will turn around and go, gosh, I remember when my kids were little. It's exhausting. So, yes, I can help you feed for 5 minutes or so. When we get to the interests, we start to see each other as people again. It gets us past that firm position. Union negotiations are like this. Labor unions are real good at stating positions, but nothing ever gets resolved until they get to the interests behind those positions and find out what workers really want. Then they start to hammer out the contracts. So position is that opening gambit in the game. This is what I'm saying right now because I'm angry or upset, I'm hurt, but the positions are behind that. And to resolve a conflict, you've got to go beyond positions and start looking at the interests. There's a classic mediation story that we tell. And it's about an orange morning, and they're almost sold out already. And two customers both come by and they both want that one orange. They both make a grab for it, but there's only one orange, right? So customer A says, I want that orange. I need it this morning. And the other one says, well, I do too. I'm making a recipe and I have to have an orange. The fruit seller wants to make everybody happy, but she's got two customers and one orange. That's a problem. So she asks them why they want the orange. She's just looking for those interests, hoping that there's something out there that will resolve this. Person A says, well, I want an orange with breakfast. I want that sweet, juicy fruit. I want to eat it. But person B says, but I'm baking a birthday cake this morning. It's an orange cake, and I need the peel to grate into my batter. So they don't want the same thing at all. They both want the orange, but for different reasons. When the seller realizes that, she gets them talking. They realize that they're both neighbors. So they split the cost of that orange. Person one grates the peel into her batter, runs the orange down the street to her neighbor who enjoys it with breakfast. They've gotten beyond the positions, I want the orange, to the interest. This is why I want the orange and what I really need from the situation. There was no true conflict. So one of the most necessary things in trying to resolve a conflict is to explore the interests, move from positions to interests. And that takes some discussion sometimes. So what can you do to help? Can you de-escalate the conflict and help find a resolution to it? Well, first you have to know which hat you're wearing. Okay. So are you one of the combatants? Is this your conflict? Are you actively involved in this? Or are you a peacemaker not actively involved? Because those are different roles, and you're going to find yourself in both at one time or another, but you can't do both at the same time usually, unfortunately. Okay, so if you're a party to the conflict, you're the one who's having difficulty with a coworker, a supervisor, or an employee. What can you do? And what you're trying to do to make this work better is to shift yourself from that angry type 1 thinking into the calmer, more rational, more reasoned type 2 thinking. So I've listed some steps here, but as you look at them, think about which ones might move you over from type 1 to type 2. First of all, calm down. You have to calm down because, as we said, when you're emotional, type 1 kicks in. You can't get to type 2 thinking when you're upset. So you have to calm down, take a walk, slow your breathing. Slowing your breathing lowers your heart rate, lowers your adrenaline levels. It has a physical effect on you and the way you think. They actually teach Navy SEALs something called circular breathing. I've also seen it called square breathing, where they breathe in slowly, hold it for a number of seconds after that, exhale slowly, hold it again for a few seconds. And what it does is it lowers the heart rate. It slows everything down and allows them to think more clearly. So calm yourself down, check your physical needs. Are you too hot, too cold? Are you hungry? Do you need to use the restroom? All of those things also make it less likely that you can focus on the real issues. So take care of those needs quickly as you're calming yourself. Consider your frame. And by frame, again, we're talking about what did you bring into this? What's your history with this person? What are your perspectives on it? And why is it a political belief, a cultural thing, a race belief? Is it a policy issue? Is it just your experience in the workplace? Is it that fight you had this morning that's put you on edge for all day? So what is your frame as you approach this conflict? Can you start the process of separating your position from your interest? The position is your immediate reaction, what you're saying in the situation. You're lazy, you're a lazy worker. What's the interest? I need you to do this to help me today, or I need this for a specific reason, or maybe you really need something different and the fight really isn't about what you said it's about, and you haven't even realized that yet. So what do you need to resolve the conflict? What's your interest? Remember to separate the behavior of the person you're fighting with from the person. Any of you who have raised children understand this. You can love your child to death and just find the behavior of the day deplorable. The behavior does not make the person. So separate the behavior from the person and remember why you value this coworker. Contemplate the other's frame. Once you can calm down enough to do that, this helps a lot. What does that other person bring into the situation? What's their history in this type of setting? What kind of day are they having? How are they feeling that day? What's happened? What are their needs? And then try to explore their interests in conversation. That's very helpful. Can you find some shared interests or goals? Once you can do that, when you get to the interests, if there are any that both of you share, that's the building block that you can use to move the conversation together and to start to find a resolution. And if you are stuck, is there someone that both of you respect that you can ask to come in and facilitate that discussion for you? Someone who can move it forward, keep everything calm, and guide you, help you through to a resolution. So these are all things that you can do if you're part of the conflict. Now, what about if you're the peacemaker? You are the person that's been asked to help people resolve their conflict. First, you again have to calm yourself. You cannot help someone else if you're not centered. It's very much like getting on an airplane and the flight attendants do their oxygen mask talk, and then they tell you that you have to put your own mask on before you can help the people around you. Exactly the same situation. You cannot help anybody else if you're rattled, if you're distracted, if you're not at peace. You have to just take some time and calm yourself before you start trying to help other people in conflict. Then you need to arrange for a quiet, private, and safe place for that discussion. And by safe, I mean a place where the combatants, the people in conflict, are going to be comfortable. Neither one of them feels threatened by that space or the surroundings. I also mean a physically safe space. That can be a challenge sometimes. If there's any hint that there might be violence, then you need to find a space where there are other people, maybe outside the door, in the hallway, that can hear what's going on, a place that you feel comfortable with. As an elder mediator, I go into family homes a lot, but since I moved to Texas, I didn't have to do this when I lived up north for the most part. But down here, one of my initial questions always is, are there weapons in the home? If there are, I'm probably not going to mediate there, because when people get angry and they know there are weapons in the home, there's a chance for disaster. So I'm going to find a quiet, private, safe place for the discussion. And you have to allow adequate time for it. And that can be really tricky in the workplace. But if people are truly mad at each other, you're not going to resolve it in 5 minutes. You're going to have to be willing to sit down and allow those employees the time to sit down and talk this through. Then as you get people in the room and you're ready to start working with them, slow your breathing. Bring your breathing rate down. And they will do the same. It's almost like a magic thing. If you can speak slowly, slow your breathing rate, slow your pulse, the people around you will start to calm down as well. They will mimic your patterns, whether they're aware of it or not. And they're usually not, but it really helps. For the same reason you relax your posture. They're going to come in all tight and muscles bunched up and shoulders hunched and fists clenched sometimes and sit very rigidly. If you relax your posture, they relax their posture. It takes some time, but they will follow your lead. Always remember that hungry people are cranky. Even if it's a workplace situation, you want to resolve it quickly. Bring in, a snack of some sort and a bottle of water for them. That helps. Not only does it make it more of a social occasion, and social occasions have expectations, right? We're going to be civil, we're going to be polite, we're going to be pleasant, and that helps. But you also can't get a cranky, hungry person to focus. So you want to make them as comfortable as possible. Then how do you start? If you're the peacemaker, you want to set some rules for their discussion, and that can be very easy, very simple. Just, we're all going to treat each other with courtesy today. We're going to hear each other out and not interrupt. If you do get upset, let me know. We're going to take a quick break then. That's perfectly okay. But we are going to listen to each other and be polite and be kind to each other. Once you get them ready to start, then ask each party to describe their perspective. You're going to get a few valid facts out of that, probably, maybe not as many as you'd like, but some. But you're going to get what they think the facts are. You're going to be seeing how they see the problem through their frame. So that's important. And you ask them to listen to each other. When you think you do have a grasp of the facts, again, don't be so sure that you have all of them. Then you start to ask about their desired resolution. So get them to state their positions. What do they think's happened? Why are they so upset? Then you want to move to that next step, getting into the interests. So they've stated their positions, but we know that there are interests behind those positions. As the discussion continues, you want to explore their interests. Sometimes you can do that in the group setting. Sometimes you're going to want to break them into maybe 2 separate spaces and talk to each individually for a few minutes and say, what's really going on here? It sounds to me like you're really upset about this, but I think there's more to it than what you said. What is it that you're feeling? What is it that you really need to see happen here today? And that's when you may hear the themes of respect or justice. It's an unfair work assignment, or somebody's not doing their fair share, or somebody did not treat me with respect. They insulted me or made it seem like I'm less competent or less intelligent. So start exploring those unmet needs. And then we've talked about frames. In conflict resolution, we talk about reframing. This is where you, as the peacemaker, help them both look at the situation in a new frame, in a new way, change their perspective. It's like, I'm hearing this from you and I'm hearing this from you. But what if we looked at it this way? What if we looked at it from the perspective of the residents who overheard your argument this morning? How are they looking at that? How does it make them feel? What do they need to see in your behavior? How can we reframe that problem? And especially once you get to the interests, it's much easier to start that reframing, because the situation and the conflict may not be about what it seemed to be on its surface. So now you've got a new set of interests to work with and problems to discuss. So that is just extremely helpful if you can help them reframe the conflict and look at it from a new perspective. What do you do when their tempers get hot? And they will. You take short breaks. You separate the parties during those breaks so they each get an emotional timeout, sort of. They get to calm down. This is where you again watch your breathing and your body language and try to calm them down. One thing that works, and it's actually kind of fun, is when they start yelling, you start whispering and you make it look important. You're saying something they need to hear, but you get softer and softer. 9 times out of 10, they will stop yelling pretty quickly because they can't hear you and you're in charge of the meeting and they need to hear, because they don't know if you're listening to them or if you're supporting them unless they can hear. So they stop yelling and start listening to you. So it's just a technique that works a lot. Sometimes we do shuttle diplomacy if tempers really are too hot for them to be productive in the same room at the same time. So you put one person in the office next to you, you keep one in your room for a moment, and you go back and forth, trying to explore those interests rather than just the positions. And you take information that they allow you to carry back and forth. When they are calmed down and you think you've got some common ground for them to work on, then you bring them back together. Again, if somebody's cranky, try feeding them. It just works. And in a very weird way, math helps. Getting someone to think about numbers forces them to calm down. The portion of the brain that controls type 1 thinking doesn't do math, doesn't do complex language issues either. It's just really raw emotion and quick responses. So if you can find a semi-valid reason to ask someone to think about numbers, well, how many residents do you think you care for in an average hour? Make them start doing that math. It immediately starts to shift them from type 1 to type 2 thinking, because now they have to engage more evolved levels of the brain to answer the mathematical question. It doesn't have to be super obvious. It should be related to what you're discussing. But if you can move them to a mathematical mode for even a few minutes, you pull them out of the type 1 thinking abyss that they're in. Shared tasks can also do that. It's like, gosh, guys, let me just stop you here for a moment. That sun coming in the window is blinding me. Do you think maybe we could move our table around? I still like the sunlight, but I think we need to move everything around so that's not hitting us right in the face. So how about you person A, take the chairs, and person B, will you help me move the table? And then let's all rearrange the chairs. Any common task that they do successfully starts to pull them back together. It's a little tiny thing, but it can change the emotional tone of the room. Okay, so you've calmed them down. They're talking to each other again. They're talking to you. You're making progress. This is when you ask each of them to imagine how the other feels. Explore the frame of the person they're in conflict with, what their interests may be, and then really a good key question, what will the other person think would be a reasonable solution? Not what do you think is a reasonable solution to this conflict? What do you think the other person would say is a reasonable solution to this conflict? It forces them to think about each other's needs and wishes and their frames and what's important in their histories, all of those things. But if they can put themselves in their opponent's shoes, you're going to make a lot of progress. Help them brainstorm real world workable solutions to their conflict. So if you've moved this far along, you're looking at interests rather than positions. They're trying to imagine what the other wants out of this or needs to get out of this. Then help them start brainstorming solutions that you can put on the table. The options are out there so that they can discuss. And again, you look for those common interests. If you hear anything similar from both of them, then you're going to want to start there and build with that. It builds unity, it emphasizes their common purpose and goals, and you're going to make some significant progress. Okay, next steps as you're working your way through the problem. If they get stuck on an issue, that's okay. There is always more than one issue. If they're stuck on an issue and you're just not getting anywhere, move on to another issue and really hope that you can get some agreement on issue number 2. Because if you do, now we've got a common interest, we've got some accomplishment, we've got some agreement, we have momentum going. We can go back now and tackle issue number 1, and you're much likely to find some agreement there once you've resolved issue number 2. Maybe you can't resolve everything. That's quite common. People can agree to disagree. Coworkers can agree to disagree. That's not a problem, as long as those unresolved issues do not disrupt the workplace. So maybe they agree on issues 1 and 3. They agree to disagree on issue 2, but that's not really going to affect their job performance. So, okay, we're different people. We all disagree with each other on certain things. That's not bad necessarily. We just need to make sure that the work can be done efficiently. And beware of power differentials. So if it's a supervisor and an employee in conflict, that's a different situation than 2 peers. So you have different issues. You may have different amounts of honest disclosure. The employee may not be comfortable complaining about the supervisor. The supervisor may not want to consider that perhaps they're part of the problem because they're at a different level. It's a little trickier, and you need to be aware of those power differentials. And we see that in healthcare all the time. We have the doctor to the nurse to maybe the hands-on care aide, or the transportation person, whoever we're dealing with. We have some very definite straight line power differentials, and those show up in conflicts. So we need to be respectful of those, but also see how those impede our progress. Okay, if progress has truly stalled, you're not getting anywhere in resolving the conflict, ask each party, probably separately, what will happen if they do not resolve their conflict. In mediation, our acronym for that is WATNA. What is your worst alternative to a negotiated agreement? What's the worst thing that can happen if you don't resolve this? Maybe both employees are disciplined. Maybe someone gets fired. Whatever it is, maybe they've actually hurt someone else and that needs to be repaired, and that's not going to happen. So whatever it is, worst case scenario in their heads, if they don't resolve this today while they're meeting with you, what is a bad thing that may come out of that? Alternatively, if they make any progress at all, be sure to provide affirmation for that. When they agree on something, when someone maybe concedes a point, it's like, I can really see how your thinking is changing and how you're working through this. And I admire that. It's great that you can see this from another perspective. That's really helpful in this discussion. So when there's something good that happens, make sure you emphasize that and appreciate it. And don't lose your cool. Even when you're frustrated, you have to model the behaviors that you want the parties to use. So if you want them to be civil and courteous, you can't veer from that. You are always going to treat each of them with respect and with courtesy and with care. So you model those behaviors. If you're losing your cool, you're just so frustrated, then you just need to call a break and you take yourself for a walk around the building or outside briefly, and you slow your breathing and you relax your posture and you center yourself, and then you come back. And it's really important that throughout the process, you maintain the attitude that you fully expect that they're going to resolve this today. It's not a big deal. This happens all the time. Conflict is inevitable. And I know we can work through this, so let's just sit down and talk it out. If you don't have confidence that this can be resolved peacefully, you'll never get them to do it. So you need to exude, radiate that confidence. When you find a solution, what do? You confirm with each party that they agree with the points. So we're clear what that agreement is. And then if it's helpful, actually record that, write it down in a little memo that goes to each of them just so that they can hang on to that, or stick a note in personnel files, whatever fits that situation. But if you can reduce it to writing, that's something everybody can come back to in 6 months when maybe a similar conflict rears its ugly head again. It's like, no, we've resolved this already. This is what we did last time. This is what we're sticking to. And be sure to thank them both for their time and energy in resolving the conflict. You don't blame them for having a conflict and taking your time. You thank them for finding a productive, civil way to resolve their conflict and for putting their time and energy into finding a resolution. Now they feel good about it, and so do you. So if you're a larger organization, just quickly, because I know we want to take questions soon. What can you do to set this up sort of as a system that you can fall back on whenever you need it? You would want to designate 1 or 2 of your employees as facilitators or mediators in your organization. I probably wouldn't make both of those people supervisors. I would try to find a lower level employee that employees may be more comfortable with than always going to a supervisor for help. Get those folks some conflict resolution trainings and mediation training, and then identify them to other employees so they know who to approach. Write a simple policy that encourages staff members to use those people to resolve conflicts. Encourage your supervisors before they move to disciplinary measures if it's a conflict type of situation rather than just an absolute flagrant violation of rules. Ask them to try using the conflict resolution process first and encourage them to support it. And when issues may be too big for your in-house people to handle, or they may involve people that outrank or cause problems for your in-house facilitators, feel free to engage an outside mediator. There are a lot of people who specialize in employment mediation. There are others that work more with healthcare issues like I do. But find someone to help you who will come in and be that calm presence to set up a process to try to resolve the issues in ways that make everybody feel good and more successful. conflict can actually be a good thing. In healthcare, it really is inevitable. It's going to happen all the time. What it does is that conflict shows you unrecognized or ignored workplace problems. It brings them to the surface. It encourages the use, as we work through the resolution process, creative resolution will encourage the use of multiple frames to further explore those situations and see what the problems are out there. It encourages parties to brainstorm successfully to find resolution, and those new ideas they come up with may solve tomorrow's problems. It respects your entire staff. It makes them feel heard and appreciated. It actually promotes unity. When two people resolve a problem successfully and shake hands or do whatever the equivalent of that is, and decide that they can work well together despite this conflict, more to be successful working together in the future. They've built a bond. It teaches better actions or better methods of interaction to all of your staff, and that's always helpful. And it catches problems before they get too big. If you set up a system that says this is how we address conflicts in our organization, you're going to catch things before they hit the crisis stage. Otherwise, if there is no system in place, people don't know that it's okay to be in conflict and there is no process to resolve those differences, then things fester until they reach the crisis stage and you have a huge problem. Early intervention makes sense for the employees and for the organization. That's really what I had for you today. We've talked a little bit about the type 1, type 2 thinking, about framing. That's what I promised to talk about. The differences between positions and interests, that's really important. And a number of things that you can implement when you're in conflict or when you're helping other staff members who are in conflict. So next month, we're going to be moving the same discussion into the realm of what if we're in conflict with a patient or client or a family member? How do we carry these conflict resolution techniques into those situations to try to ease things? So please come back, and I think Beth can give us the date for that. I'm not 100% sure. I know it's very early in September. It's right around Labor Day. But Beth, I will turn it back to you. And if you folks, I'll take. But if you want to give me a call about something, if you want to email me, there's the contact information. Thank you so much for being a great audience. I appreciate you coming today. Beth, take it away.
Thank you, Delilah. So we do have a couple of questions, and if you want to follow along with me and chat as well.
Sure.
Miss Barbara Glass, she asked, could you tell a story that illustrates reframing?
Okay. Just trying to pull out a simple story. Okay. Barbara, you and I are in conflict over how a policy over use of Medicaid funds is going to affect our organization. How are we going to use those funds? Okay. And you are insisting that it be used for low-income clients, and we should supplement the funds that they can use to access our services. I'm saying that that's perhaps unjust. We need to share it around equally, or we need to implement a new program that's accessible to everybody, and we just can't agree. So we ask a coworker to come in who looks at it all and says, gosh, I can see both of your points, but we've got that project we've had on the back shelf for the last 2 years, the one we used to run really successfully, and we haven't been able to fund that. We had to let go of the person who handled that. If we took this money, we could put that back in, and we know that's a successful prior program. And I think it does some of what you both said. It helps people who couldn't afford that privately, and we couldn't afford to offer it. And it also offers a service that's not new to us, compromised, but can we do that in a new way and consider new ideas? Does that make some sense?
She's shaking her head. All right.
Okay.
Christy Boyle has a breathing technique for us called 5 by 5, 5 breaths. That you inhale for 5 seconds, hold for 5 seconds, then exhale for 5 seconds and hold for another 5 seconds. Have you heard of the 5 by 5?
Yeah, absolutely. That's very similar to the Navy SEALs training. I think they do it 6 by 6, but yes, and that works, doesn't it? It's just really interesting when you try that yourself. It calms you down. If you can get the people in the room to do it, it calms them down. It's an amazing thing. Thank you for sharing that, Christy.
We just have a couple of, this training has been very helpful. Excellent presentation. Miss Erica is asking what to do if violence has already happened.
Okay, now this is a more difficult situation. If we're talking today about workplace situations, so if one employee has assaulted another, you've got conflict, obviously, but you may also have, a violation of your own rules of behavior that you're willing to accept. Certainly, it'd be nice to know why this happened, but if someone is physically in danger at the moment, you're not going to try to sit down and talk about it. If you think the employee who has just lost it for the day has, lashed out at one employer or she had a resident, and you're afraid this is going to continue, he or she is still in the building, then you're going to call 911. You're going to get some help with this and move them out of the building. Then you can consider the process later, as you bring them back in tomorrow or the next day. What happened to cause this? Is it something that you can understand, forgive, work within your own disciplinary process, or is it such an egregious violation of your rules that you really have to terminate the employee? Violence is beyond just a normal conflict. Violence is usually a response to unmet needs, but it's not always something that can be resolved through conversation. And you have to think about the safety of other employees and residents. So you have to look at your own policies, consider how egregious it was. Is there any ongoing risk? You're going to have to look at that more seriously. So you can't talk through everything, unfortunately. So that's going to be a tough one to deal with.
Seeing any additional questions at this time. So just a huge thank you to you, Delilah, for your time, your expertise.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, for me too, what great information, just if those conflicts ever arise in the workplace, that I now have different techniques to apply. As Delilah said, our second part of this series is going to be Wednesday, September 1st from 12 to 1. It'll be another Zoom presentation. I will be sending out the invite probably the week before, but if you want to put it on your calendar for now. And then I will also be doing the follow-up email, sending out the slides as well as our video. And I believe that's it. Thank you guys again for supporting Faith Presbyterian Hospice and our educational events. And Delilah, once again, thank you so much. Everybody enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you soon.
Thank you all very much.
We have to register again for the second one, part 2. Beth? Okay.
The date, Wednesday, September 1st?
Yeah, no, do we have to register again?
Yes,
Okay.
It will be Zoom registration, and I'll send you the link and everything, just like for this one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Emila.
Thank you.
Good job.
All right, I guess we're signing off. Take care, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Miss Delilah.
You are so welcome. Thank you for being here.
Bye-bye. It was
Beth,
great.
This was perfect
Thanks.
timing. It really helped me.
Good, good. Okay, Beth, I'm going to send you the slides right now before I forget.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to go
Okay,
ahead and
thank
sign
you very
off.
much, man. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.